Okay, so we are going to be looking at a few objects in Power Wash Simulator today. So a nice simple game, but I come across some of these items in this arena, and I thought they'd be a really good group to look at, and then build actually live. So we're actually going to build these live. A combination of cube and cylindrical based stuff, as well as just looking at some stuff where we can actually kind of blend the two workflows together. So quite simply, first the cube-based stuff, very simple. You can see big old cubes, but these are similar to what we made in class with the crates, and we're going to make them very similar to that. But these are a little bit more advanced. There's a little bit more kind of information attached to them. So instead of just having like a blank edge, these have actually got planks going across, and actual 3D planks. If you get in the right direction or get in the right angle, you can see that they're actually properly 3D planks, which is great, as well as a proper lid, as you can see. An actual lid that, if you get to the edge, you can see that it actually has some 3D form there. So this gives it a little bit more believability. Now what's on top? We've got two little kind of support beams on the very top, nice and good, and then we've got this texture, which is like obviously planks. Now if we look at other ones similar to it, we get very similar objects that are pretty much the same, but either bigger, smaller, longer, taller, whatever. We can always make these extra objects from this base form. If we make one of these, we can always make one of these. Now, one thing I really want to kind of point out as well, and we'll have a look at it on other objects, is what's going on, basically what we call behind the scenes, on the textures. So this looks like it's got planks on it. You can see how the divides between the different planks there. They're not actually physically there. If we actually get into the right position and get close enough, we can see that on the edge there isn't actually any geometry to denote these planks. It's all texture based. Now in a game like this, that's perfectly cool. On most games, that's perfectly cool. It all depends on the believability, the fidelity that we want to be seeing this object in, how close we're going to get to this object, how big we are relative to the object, and if this object is going to be used for any FMV, live action trailer kind of stuff. The only reason I would put planks in this if it was in a game is if we were on a box like this anyway, on a very clean, very kind of like it's not very bashed around or anything like that, is if we were small enough where we were actually interacting with the different kind of planks. So if we were like a small creature and we were jumping across this as like an obstacle course or something. Other than that, it's very simple. So let's have a look at this barrel here. So this again, super simple. You might have seen me make something like this in class very fast. It is super simple. But what I want to do is just pay attention to, again, the geometric breakdown of what's happening here. So I'm going to just go around and do a bit of counting. I'm going to orientate myself. So here is 1. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. This is 18 edges round. But from afar, even close up, it looks round. The human brain says this is a round thing. And then what other features we've got on it? Obviously we've got the top, and there'll be a bottom. We've got the straps, the Coopers going round, and we've got some sort of like bung on the front of it there, which has actually got a geometric inset there, as we can see. But very simple. There are 6 belts going around it. Nice and simple. You can see there's an identical one here. The only difference being different colours. So this one's darker, this one's lighter. We get more of these boxes. We got more of these boxes here. Again, the same, pretty much the same construction. The difference being that the longer boxes, the support beams go lengthways, and the smaller boxes, this one TNT box, they go widthways like this. They go short way. So very simple. This, we're going to smash up some of these very quickly. Where these might differ, or where you might want to put more information in, is if you're doing a very stylized game, or you're doing an object which has seen a lot of wear and tear, seen a lot of history, and you're having like very heavily splintered planks, and it being stylized, maybe there's less planks on it. There's more, like there might only be like 5 planks, but each plank is a super dynamic kind of shape, very reminiscent of things like Sea of Thieves, Slime Rancher, that kind of stuff. So they're, like I said, very basic shapes. Another very basic shape is stuff like a signpost. In games you'll always need this kind of stuff. You know, if you go from games set in the Middle Ages all the way up to modern day, you're going to need a signpost. And what is a signpost? A signpost is just some form of stick. In this case, we've got a cylinder. Not a cylinder, sorry. We've got a cuboid shape. And then some form of directional thing, which again is just a cuboid shape. The only difference being that there's just a little bit, you can see on the top there's a little bit of shape. It's not quite just a flat, there we go. It's not quite just a flat surface, and the same on these signs here. There's a little bit of shape there. Now these are all probably from the exact same, these signs anyway, are probably from the exact same bit of geometry. They're just modified a little bit. Or even, looking at this, they might all just have been rotated upside down or flipped or done something, you know. As soon as you change the orientation of something, most of the time that's enough for people to almost like ignore the fact that it's like repeated objects just rotated. It's enough information for people to go, okay, I get what I'm seeing, moving on. So another very, very simple one. The small details in here, like these little studs, which would make one of these studs and then we just place them around. Very, very simple. And in fact, I don't know if it comes out in the video here, but these are all built. So this would literally just be a pyramid or a cube that you make the very top small, and I can see beveled edges just on the edge of each one of these. As it meets the surface, I am seeing a kind of flat edge just on the corner there, so those are beveled, which is nice. So going a bit more complex now, we've got this little cart here, but it's a cylindrical based object in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas, and the rest of it is cube based. Essentially it's just a big crate that's got a little bit of a different shape to it. You know, it's got the same kind of idea of you got a top, you extrude in, you extrude down. In this case it kind of comes down, then comes in, then comes down a little bit with a tiny bit of curve. So let's see if we can see the amount of edges used for this curve. So we've got from the base here going up, we've got one point there, and then we go up again, and pretty much that's it. Yeah, so there's one edge right at the bottom there to give it a little bit of a like a cartoony kind of feel. Again, we've got these little shapes on the end here that again are probably just stuck in. We make one, we duplicate it around. There's no point making tons of the same object. Make one, pass it around. And these are sort of like they've been made very, very simple kind of wheels. Exactly the same method that we'd make the crates with, because obviously you just get a cylinder and you just use the extrusion, offset, and thickness just to make this kind of shape. And then it is placed. I don't think there's any reason why they'd make an axle underneath if we're not seeing it. And these little bumpers at the front here, these little magnets, again, you'd make them very, very simply, place them on. This is more of a complex, almost like a prop, because it's multiple objects making one bigger object, multiple basic objects making one more complex object. The same thing for things like this. You know, this is just 2 cylinders, essentially. You've got one cylinder for the pole and one cylinder for the head there. Or, depending on how you build it, it could be one cylinder that you then just make the rest of this from it. And we'll make one of these as well, because something like this, quite easy. So yeah, like little environments like this, like I said, it's really fun to look around and find a very, very simple stuff. I've even got the signs here as well, so there's many different signs shapes that are fun to look at that again are just being built off either cube based modeling or they're built off cylindrical based modeling. This one here I could do as a combination of 2 of them, so I can make the main body as a cube and then this kind of round section where the horns are as a cylinder. Again, we're going to make one of these. Something like this, the sheriff's logo, super simple. You can see that it's got a bit of beveling on the edges there, and it's just a little bit kind of fluted. It kind of comes in on the inside there. Super simple to make. Same with this one. You know, I'm seeing the same kind of shapes everywhere. I'm seeing the corners are being beveled. I'm seeing these rounder edges. In fact, I think this sign here might be this sign here that's just been modified a little bit. I'm not quite sure. But there are a load of this kind of things. Again, you look around any game, you'll find tons of this sort of stuff. The more modern day to kind of like Victorian times, you'll see a lot more easy ones. The more futuristic ones, you're dealing with a lot of cubes and cylinders that are really, really simple. Juxtaposed to that, you get a lot of complex objects like ships and guns and weird aliens. back in the old, but in older set games, you get a lot of not a lot of very very simple mass-produced stuff, but you can see a lot of the basic forms, the basic primitives being used a lot more because, you know, if they're designed right, you're not going to get super elaborate wiring because it didn't exist back then. You're going to get big chimneys, you're going to get big buckets, you're going to get, you know, big thick wooden doors, that kind of jazz. Okay, so let's make some stuff. First of all, I'm going to make one of this crate, and then I'm going to make it, turn it into the other two. And then we're going to make a barrel, and then we're going to make some signs. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to... Yep. I need you. There you go. And then I'm going to just change my window to this. There we go. So you should be able to see that now. Move you into place. There we go. Super professional. Right. Okay. So I've got that up on the other screen. So that's my reference. I'm not guessing anything. I'm looking at the object there, and I've made my I'm making my project. So I've got my paintball arena, and I've set it to my desktop, and all good. So boom, there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make everything to a scale. I'm going to try and scale everything together. By default, each one of these little squares is a centimeter. So this whole grid is a 24 by 24 centimeter, because each one of these little grids is broken down into a quadrant. So you can see that thicker grey line there. This is a 12 by 12 grid. But what I'm going to do is not necessarily treat that as centimeters. I'm going to treat those as inches or feet or meters, depending on what I'm doing, just for the sake of doing this for now. Obviously, if you're working on proper projects, you'll hopefully have some kind of measuring device given to you by your art lead, or you know, if you're building something to the real world kind of scale, you'll have like a mannequin to be like, that's a 6 foot person, we're going to scale everything to that. We will be using something like that in later assignments. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make one of those big crates, and I'm going to fill this whole grid with it. So I'm going to just make it nice and big like that, and again just make sure that we are working to the center of the world like that. I'm just going to start off by doing a save. Oh, where's my save window? Where's my Maya save window? So there you go, I've got my props 01 save there, so I'll begin in there. There you go. And off we go. So I'm going to start this the same way I started anything else. I'm just going to grab all the faces. Well, in fact, on this one, I don't need to grab all the faces, do I? Because at the very top of this, we're going to make a lid. That's not going to be movable. It's going to be part of the mesh. But this isn't going to have the same insets that everything else has got it. So I'm going to grab everything but the top and then do my insets. So polymodeling, then extrude. I'm going to keep faces together, turn that off. I'm just going to offset these in. Now I want this to look big. So I'm not going to have my offsets be particularly large. I'm going to have these be quite thin. Thinking about like a 2x4. Like that. And then I'm going to extrude again. And I'm just going to push these in a little bit. Again, not too much. I don't need to go really deep in. Awesome. So already we've got a nice shape there. Let's turn on my wireframe. There you go. Now I'm going to make the lid. This is going to be super easy. All I'm going to do is going to take that top bit here, and I'm going to just extrude it up slightly. So that's the thickness of the wood that makes up the lid. Now, as you saw in the when we were walking around the level, that lid has a slight kind of curve to it. That's really easy. I'm going to do that just by adding in edges. So I'm going to get all the edges going around that top section there. So just this little small edge here. Mesh tools, connect. I'm going to add 2 segments in there, and then I'm just going to scale those out slightly, just enough to give me that kind of information. That's enough. That's all I need. Awesome. So I've already made a lot of progress. The next thing I'll need to do is make those little planks, those little sections at the top. Now I can do this a couple of different ways. I can do this by adding in edges. and then like we did in the first video where I added those edges in and extruded up, I could also make them from separate bits of geometry and then bring them in and either just place them on top or you should blend them in, attach them to the main surface by using kind of functions. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them separately and then I'm going to bring them onto the main surface, and I'm going to do this a little bit of a long way to show you different methods of how we can do things. So not everything is just adding in edges and then extruding up and or extruding in or anything like that. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to make separate objects, put them where I want them to go, and then I'm going to basically do, it's going to look crazy what I do. I'm going to delete a face and then I'm going to rebuild that face. It'll all make sense when I'm done. And again, this isn't the right way of doing stuff, this is just our way of doing something. There are loads of different ways of doing something, and it does really depend on the flow that you're working on. So I'm currently thinking this will be fun and quick to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another cube, but I'm not going to hold shift this time because I know that I want something more like this kind of shape. So I'm going to manually make it myself. And here's where things get a little bit more, not complicated, just a bit more interesting. What I'm going to do, I'm going to set the pivot point to be at the bottom of this object, because currently, as you can see, it's in the middle. But I want it to be in the middle, but on the bottom, in line with the bottom vertex. Now this is really easy to do. I've shown this to a couple of people in class. If I just grab one of the arrows, I'm in movement mode here. If I grab one of the arrows, it moves the object, obviously. If I hold D for delta, you can see the kind of pivot point kind of changes, and I can move this and it moves a pivot point, which is great. Now if I hold D and V, you see at the top there, the little V, when I press V, the little magnet turns on. V stands for vertex, and it's a snap to function. So this will snap to vertex. And all I'm going to do is drag down, using the arrow, I'm not using the center, using the arrow, I'm going to drag down and snap it. I'm going to move my arrow to the vertex I want to snap it to. Now this means that I'm constraining it to only move up and down, but then I'm snapping it, I'm constraining it to align to this vertex here. So I've got to move my mouse to the vertex like that. And I can see that's in the center like that, but it's in line at the bottom with the bottom of the object, which is great. This is what I want, because I want to make sure that the bottom of this snaps perfectly flush to the top of this. So D and V, we're going to use that a lot for stuff. And I know that I don't want this bottom face eventually. This will go away, so I'm actually going to delete this bottom face, because this will disappear eventually. Cool. And now I'm going to use another snap to function. I'm going to use X. Now X snaps to grid. So V snaps to vertex. It means that I can snap this to vertexes around the objects. Whereas X snaps to grid. So again, I'm holding X. You can see up there, we've got a little magnet icon highlighted. And now what I can do is, you can see that now it's moving, it's kind of jumping. That's because it's snapping to grid points like this. You can see that it's actually snapping to the grid there, which is great. So what I'm going to do, seeing as this object is in the middle of the scene, I'm going to snap this to the middle of the scene. So I'm going to snap it to about there, so you can see it's in the middle. And then I'm going to hold V and snap it to the top. And here, so actually first, before I do that, I should actually count how many grid points I've come in. So I've come in, let's find a good position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've come in 5 grid points. Now I want to know that because I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to come in 5 grid points on the opposite side. So let me just duplicate this. I'm going to hold X and drag it over. So I've come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So now I've got 2 planks of wood right in the same direction, or the same position on the opposite side. So what I'm going to do is then hold V, move it up. Again, remember that it snaps to the closest vertex to your mouse. So I want to move my mouse to one of the top corners. So now that sits flush and perfectly to that object. And then I'm just going to adjust the scale. You know, get the right kind of height for this. Like that, and then like that, and then like that. Now because these aren't combined just yet, this is one of the fun things about Maya, these aren't combined just yet. You can see one's white, meaning it's part of a selection group. If they were both green, it means they're part of the same selection group. But because I've selected this, then hold shifts like this one, the parent, the main one, turns green, and then everything else turns white. Just says it's part of the same general selection. So now I can just use my scale just to decide the width of this, which is good. Oops, there you go. And I'm happy. So the position of that I'm quite happy with. And also the height of the planks on top I'm happy with. So what I'm going to do now is actually delete this very, very top face. I'm going to delete this. Like this. Because I'm going to use the bridge tool to fill in the gaps. And then we're going to be left with a few triangles. We'll fill those gaps in. And then we'll be good. But first of all, I want to combine all three of these assets together. So the main body, then the two planks. I'm going to combine them all together. Because this is the only way that bridging will work. You can't bridge between two objects that aren't combined. You need to be able to combine the objects to actually bridge them. So, bridging time. I'm going to bridge basically the outside of the box there to there. Remember our bridge is this little icon here. So now we bridge that, which is good. I bridge the other opposite side. There to there, and that's nice. And then I'll bridge in between here, so I'll bridge from there to there. Like that. So now we're starting to fill this in a little bit. So, now we've got some zones left. We've got both sides here have got big old holes. So what I would do here is I would look at what is the best face to bridge and fill this gap in, and vice versa the other side. It's not going to be this little small face here. Like, I can't do that. I don't want to be doing that. That's not a good bridge. However, if I did this, see how that fills in nicely, and all I've got is little triangles on the side. That's much nicer. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Oh, I deleted a face, so I'll have to re-bridge that. There we go. So now I've filled in those areas. That's all good. And now, so let's fill in this big hole. So this is why you need to check when you're selecting stuff, especially when you're deleting stuff. Check to make sure you're not over selecting. I didn't, and I had something else selected, so I'll make sure I just bridge from there to there. We're all good. Perfect. Any more? No. Cool. So when you're bridging across two objects, so between one plane to another, or if you're filling in a quad, you need to select both edges. But if you're just filling in a triangle, this is a cool thing. If you're just filling in a triangle like this, you can just select one edge and then hit bridge, and it'll fill it in for you, which is great. Super nice. There you go. So now that object is totally done. There's no n-gons. It's very simple. It's still modifiable as well. So if I'm looking at that now thinking, ooh, you know what, these two planks are a bit too short, they need to be longer, all you have to do is go through and just select the particular area that I want to use. I want to adjust. And then I can just adjust it. Very nice. So this is my base. This is where I can make other stuff from. So I'm going to duplicate this off 3 times. Oh, I'm also going to, before I duplicate it, I'm going to put the pivot point at the bottom of this object as well. So I'm going to just drag D and V this to the bottom of the object. There you go. So now the pivot point is on the bottom of the object. So I'm going to duplicate one off, and then I'm going to duplicate another off. And here's what I'm also going to do. So again, we're introducing ourselves to a few kind of more advanced ways of thinking. Now that I've duplicated these off, I might not necessarily know which one's which for its names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name each one of these. I've got a TNT box, I've got a big box, and I've got a long box. So this one is the big box. I'm going to come over to the channel box over on the right hand side, where it says P cube, in this case P cube 4. Oops, daisy. I'm going to just click that, and I can name these objects. Naming stuff is very important, just so you can keep track of stuff. So I'm going to call this big crate. Again, I'm using an underscore in there as well. It's actually vital that we use underscores in here, just because Maya can sometimes get very confused with spaces. And this one's going to be long crate. And this one's going to be TNT. Great. There you go. Perfect. So now I've got a nice indication about what's what in my outliner and also in my names. Cool. So let's make some just general adjustments to these other boxes. So my long crate, I want this to be about half the size of this, especially if I'm doing something like a platforming game. If this is the size of a person, they might not have the jump ability to jump on top of it. Maybe the game doesn't have a mantling ability, but maybe this, they can jump on top of this, and then they can jump on top of this. You know, you can use these and stack them up inside Unreal to, you know, generate this kind of geometry. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, decide which way things are going to be long. So is it going to be long with two short planks on the edge, or is it going to be long with two long planks? Let's make a duplicate. Let's do both. So I'm going to call this long plank 1, and the original one I'm just going to call long plank 2. There we go. Because I can't have two long planks, so I've got to have at least one long plank 1, one long plank 2. So I'm going to have, yeah, one that is long with short little planks here, and then one that's long with long planks. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. So you can see that all I've done is rotate it, and then where it says rotate, where it's updating the rotation there, I'm just going to put 90 in there. There you go. Cool. So yes, what I'm going to do is just grab the very top here, and I'm going to just let's go about that high. Okay. Again, if you're working off a schematic where you actually get specific heights, work off those specific heights. So that's looking good. And then, because this is the short with stubby, I'm just going to bring this in somewhere around there. Yeah, somewhere about there. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is pretty much do the exact same shape with this, but I need to make sure that I'm using the exact same dimensions of this. Oh, you can see, actually, this is a good one to point out. Because I've scaled this not using the actual scale tool, like this, I've not used this, because I still want all the distance between the edges of this, for these planks, or the inset of these here not to change. I've just used the vertex and then moved it inwards. The pivot point is still technically in the same position. So what I've got to do is put the new pivot point in the middle of the object at the bottom, just like this, but obviously in the middle of the object on the bottom because it's off to one side. So I'm going to hit this pivot point center here, center pivot point. This just puts the pivot point in the middle of the object, and then I can do that DV and then just drag this down to the bottom of the object. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is make this one be the same width and the same height and whatever, everything else. However, I eyeballed this one into place. So if I just move these off to the side, move this off. I eyeballed these into place, so if I try and eyeball this, I'm not going to get the right height, and I want these to be the exact same height, literally just different kind of orientations of these for versatility, for variety. So I've got to make sure that I'm hitting those exact same heights. Remember the D and V function, we can use that here. So I'm going to get the height of this first, so I'm going to just grab all the top section in vertex mode. Now when you select something like this, where you select many different components, the pivot point is going to be in the middle of that selection. But I can still move the pivot point around, so D and V, I'm going to snap it to one of the top corners here. So DV, I'm going to snap it to there, and then when I drag this down, I'm going to hold V so that I can drag my mouse in line with this vertex, so it's going to snap to this height. So holding V, there we go. So now they're going to be perfectly the same height. Very good. So I'm going to do that again just to re-explain. So if I select all these vertexes at the top, the pivot point is going to be in the middle of the selection. But I want that pivot point to be on the very top corner of one of these, because that's the height, that's the highest point of this object that I want. So I'm going to hold D to release the pivot point, and then hold V to snap the vertex. I'm just going to drag this to the corner there, and then just hold V. So again, V for snap to vertex, but not holding D because I actually do want to move the stuff now. And then just hold V and drag it down, but move my mouse so I make sure I'm aligning with that, and it'll probably snap to that place straight away on something as simple as this, but just to make sure, there you go. So it's perfectly the same height as that. And now what I want to do is get the same width of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the pivot point to the bottom corner, like that, and I'm going to drag this to the bottom corner like this. So again, all I'm doing there is D and V to set the pivot point of the object to a nice anchor point, and then I'm just using V to then move that object and snap it to something. So a few people have asked me, how do you snap two objects together, aligned with each other? This is one of the ways you do it. You've just got to be aware of at what point you snap stuff together, if you get what I mean. So now what I do is I do the exact same thing. I just grab all this side in vertex mode. I set the pivot point to the bottom right corner because that's what I'm going to use to align to, and then I just hold V and snap like that. So then that's aligned to that corner. So now what I've got are two perfectly height-wise and width-wise and depth-wise are all perfectly the same. However, now the planks don't look as good. You know, the planks look a little bit kind of crap. This one we're just going to eyeball in to the best of our ability, or in fact what we can do is if we set the pivot point again to the bottom on both of them, yep, cool, I'm going to snap this to the grid. So I'm just going to hold X, I'm just going to move it so it starts snapping to the grid. I'm going to use the grid to actually help me scale this if I can. So I'm going to do a save at this point because though this was a bit technical, feel free to pause, go back and make notes about what I've just done. What I'm about to do is use the different viewports because currently we've only used perspective, but I'm going to go into the different views to make sure that these are as nicely laid out as I can make them. So let's do a save. So this is going to be save 2 at this point. So props 0, 2. There we go. So like I said, we're going to go into the different viewports, and a couple of you have done this by accident, but if you just tap space, if I'm hovering over the viewport and I tap space, you go into the view selection. So this is the for view, and you can tell what view you're looking at because if you look at the bottom of each one of these, you see perspective, which is what we normally look in. You've got side looking down the x-axis, front looking down the z-axis, and top looking down the y-axis. And I want the top because I want to be looking at this from the top. So I just hover over this top left and I tap space again. It'll take me to that view. So it's not holding space, it's tapping space. Like that. So now if I just navigate myself to these objects, I'm just going to make sure that they're, again, aligned with each other. So all I'm doing there is holding X. I'm just holding X to do that. And I'm not grabbing the middle, I'm grabbing the arrows as well. And all I've done is just made sure that they're aligned to each other. So I am turning on X, not turning on X, right? I'm turning on wireframe so you can see the wireframes. There we go. And you can turn on X-ray if you want to. That might help you do this. But I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to adjust some of this. Now, why am I doing this? What is the reason for me doing this? One, these are smaller objects. So whereas the distance between the corner or the edge of this might work on something big like this, on the big crate, on a small crate like this, that distance is a little bit too big. Plus you can see the long one with the long planks, these planks are getting really close to each other. So I'm going to move these around to get a better feel. This is going to be really easy. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, we're going to use the grid, but I'm just going to go to vertex mode and carefully just grab that right there. So if I go back to perspective mode, you can see what I've done is I've carefully grabbed all 4 vertexes on both sides, so 8 vertexes, and I shouldn't have any of the vertexes selected. I don't want that. And then I'm going to hold X, and I'm going to drag carefully up to the point where I can get about there. So you can see that's giving me a little bit of a gap right there. And I'll do the same thing on the other one. So I'll do this and I'll see what I feel. See how I feel about it. Right there. There we go. So they should be snapped equidistant from each other. Again, it's why using the X snap to grid, if we're making something very precise, is good to use. So now let's have a look in the 3D mode, see how that feels. That feels a lot better. That feels a lot more realistic. You know, the gap between the edge and then the actual supporting plank feels a lot better. If I want to nudge these in now, sorry about that. So yeah, if I want to nudge these in now, all I need to do Sorry, I accidentally paused the recording. So we had something like that before. So if I actually want to nudge these in, because maybe they're a little bit too close to the edge, and I am turning on X-ray for this, what I could do is just come in. I'm just going to make sure I identify the vertexes that I want, which in my case are going to be these. I'm just going to be carefully selecting these ones. So I don't want any other vertexes there selected. I'm just going to do the same thing here, holding shift, grabbing those. There we go. And if I go to perspective mode now, I can just slightly nudge those in. It's not too much where I'm bringing them in and making them thin like that. I'm just nudging them in slightly. There you go. And then I can do the exact same thing lengthwise. So while I've got these selected, I can also either bring them in or push them out, because maybe they need to go like that. Yeah. And in fact, what I'm going to do on both of these, looking at this now, I'm going to just grab the tops of both of them, and I'm just going to nudge them down slightly. So I'm just going to nudge these ones down, and then I'm going to use that same trick I did before. I'm going to grab these, I'm going to hold V, and I'm going to move my mouse. So grabbing that, hold my mouse down to, down to the top of one of these new planks I've just brought down. The scale felt a bit off then. It felt a bit too high. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but on these. So looking from the top, making sure that I'm not selecting anything else inside. I'm just going to grab each one of these. I'm going to say, right, it's going to be that far away from the edge. We'll see how that one feels. That feels a little bit too close. That feels just okay. So I'm going to grab these and just okay. And always check as well. So I'm doing this. I'm confident with what I'm doing. So I'm pretty confident I'm not selecting anything else. Make sure you're always checking your selections to make sure that you're not under or over selecting anything. But I'm quite confident with that. Cool. Okay, so that distance from edge to edge feels okay. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the length of this. I'm going to grab both of these. So make sure I only select what I want, like that. And then just going back into perspective mode, I'm just going to use the scale tool to bring it outwards. Something like that, yeah. So now those feel a lot better. Those feel a lot nicer. And what I've got there is two variations of something. Again, it's just enough variation to keep it a bit interesting. Because maybe one is used for one reason, maybe one's used for another reason. It could just be two variations, making the scene a little bit more interesting. But again, pause, go back, have a rewatch of what I'm doing there. But the main things I'm doing there is selection. So selecting either face mode or vertex mode, and then I'm moving the pivot point to an anchor point, a place that I can use as like a reference. So I'm bringing the pivot point down to the bottom of the box, like that, so that it's actually on the bottom of the box. I like working like that. If I'm working on something which is going to be in a scene, I need to make sure the pivot point is actually on the bottom of the object. So when we bring it into the scene, it puts itself in the right position. And then what we're doing, we're selecting specific areas to then just either in vertex or face mode, then just scale or move into place. We're using that X to snap to grid, and we're using V to snap to vertex. And we're combining that with D to release the pivot point to either D, release that and snap it to a vertex point or a grid point, depending on what you're doing. But very simple. So right there, we've got two perfectly good, two perfectly good boxes. Now, as you can see, just a bit of an aside, I've selected both of them, but as I move one, the other one moves in an opposite direction. The reason behind that is because I've rotated the object. One's 90 degrees, like this. The other one's normal, like this. So if I grab both of these and I move what this one thinks is its x-axis, is really the z-axis. So you start moving in opposite directions like this. So how do I combat that? How do I make stuff move properly? If I just hit delete history, so what delete history will do is it'll get rid of all the history that we've done to our objects. When we do beveling, cutting, expanding, bridging, whatever, we start stacking up data and history. So I'm going to delete that history. and then I'm going to hit freeze transformation, and transformations are all this information here, and freeze transformation will just make that 0 and 1. So I click that, you can see there that my translate and my rotate is 0 because there's no translate or 0. There's no translate or rotate, and my scale is set to 1 because it's a 1-to-1 scale. If this was set to 0, it wouldn't exist because that's set to a 0 scale, set to literally infinitum. So now if I do that to both of them, so select this one, do the same thing, delete history, freeze transformation. Now when I move them, they'll both move at the same kind of distance. Cool. Awesome. So move in. That's our long box is done. Awesome. Now I've got my small TNT box, so I can do some stuff with that. Now what I'm thinking with this is, because it's more of a thing that can be moved by one person, this is a 6-foot tall box. So if I was just to grab the vertexes and move them down to something which is like 2 foot by 2 foot, the planks on the sides might feel a little bit too thick and too dense. You know, this box doesn't need like a 2x4 size thing on the end of it. So I'm actually going to scale this box down a little bit. So I could either just go into my scale and then scale it down. You can see there all my scales are now updating. Or I can actually scale this down in some kind of like whole number. So 0.5. You know, I'll have a look at that. I think, right, now that those planks big enough? Or what about 0.75? 0.75. Okay, so that's a quarter of the size. Now this is still, if it's a TNT box, it's still going to need to be a little bit more robust. So I'm going to leave it as 0.75. But it just means everything's a little bit smaller. There's no reason why a box that would be carried by one person that is, you know, could be relatively light, would be made of all that kind of you know, dense information. And this is also assuming that we're still doing the exact same construction method, because I'm actually going to make another TNT box using another construction method. What I mean by that is the insets here. This one will have the exact same insets as everything else, but not everything is built like that. So I'm going to make another box in a bit which isn't built like that. So what do? Well, first of all, we just make sure that it's set to the grid like that, and then I can grab the top and I can just scale it down. So I'm going to say, right, it's going to be about that tall, it's going to be about that wide, and it's going to be about that deep, like that. Okay, cool, nice. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with these. So I'm going to change these, make them a bit bigger, make them look like they're in the better positions. So again, I'm going to tap space, then tap on top, press F to just focus in, and grabbing these again. Just make sure I grab the right pieces. I'm going to say, right, let's grab this. So I'm just kind of getting my right. They feel about right. They feel alright like that. So the width wise they feel alright, and then height wise, I grab the top, snap those up, and I grab the bottom, and I roll those up like that. Oh, turn off ghost. There we go. Yeah, that feels nice. That feels good. Awesome. So the box is almost done. I'm going to do one last thing. Actually, no, I'm going to leave that for now. But we'll do that in another video, or maybe later on in this video in an extra here's a cool trick you can do. But right now, that's my TNT box done. So we can see the same object being changed into 4 different objects right there. Now we're not quite done, because each one of them is still a little bit boring. We've still got this big old side, there's nothing really going on, and we're replicating what we watched at the beginning. So what I'm going to do now is make the little slats on the side. What are they? They're just big old planks. So I'm going to make a big old plank. So I'm actually going to hold X when I make this as well. So I'm going to hold X, and I'm going to get something that feels the right kind of density for one of these. So I'm thinking that length, or that width I should say. Length I don't really care about. And let's get a nice, there we go. So that is my plank. I'm going to use that across all of these objects. Now this is all very, very easy. I'm going to make an X, and then I'm going to move it to each, for at least for the big one, I'm going to move it to all four sides. I don't really care about the bottom because we're probably not going to see that. Then I'm going to do something different for the two boxes here, and I'm going to leave the TNT box as it is. So I've made this. This is my plank. Let's move it off to the side, and then I'm going to duplicate it. So Control D, and then I'm going to rotate the new one 90 degrees. So we would make an X like this. Very, very good. And I'm going to be cheap and cheerfully. I'm just going to put the pivot point at the bottom like this, and then I'm just going to scale it down slightly, because what I don't want to do is have two things overlapping evenly on top of each other like that. That's going to cause some issues around this area. Z fighting. It's going to cause some horrible stuff. So if I just scale one down a little bit, there we go. Now the last thing I'm going to do before I start combining and moving it is I'm going to take away all the faces that I'm never going to see. Faces that the audience don't need to see. So what are they? Well, it's the end pieces and it's the bottom piece. So take away those three. So it ends up only being a three-sided piece of geometry, which ends up being really useful when we texture and UV, because it means it's really easy to control and keep track of. So then combine these together. There's no need to merge because we're not actually merging these together. We're just going to leave them as they are. And what I use this kind of stuff for is what I call a toy box. So I might use this in a few different places. So this is the one I've made, and I'm just going to duplicate off from this to make the other one. So Control D and move it away. So now what we do, it's a lot of rotation now. It's a lot of careful movement, but we put the pivot point again at the bottom. Just make sure that's at the bottom there. We've got to think about what orientation the X is going to be on this. Is it going to be lengthways like a plus sign, or is it going to be diagonal like a times sign? Well, it's going to be diagonal. So if 90 degrees is rotating something at a 45-degree angle, what about if 90 degrees is rotating something at a 40-degree, that doesn't make any sense. If 90 degrees is making a right angle, that's better. 45 degrees, half of 90 will give you a diagonal. So I'm going to start rotating this round and then just update that number there. So it's rotating around Y. I'm going to update that with 45. There we go. And then I'm going to rotate this round like this. You can see there it's rotating around Z. I'm going to put this 90 because obviously I want this to be at a right angle. And then I just got to move this into place. So here's a quick little tip for y'all. I want to make sure that this is bang in the middle of this object right here, right bang in the middle, because my pivot point's in the middle of this object, so I want to make sure that this gets snapped to the middle of this object. But I've got nothing here to snap to in the middle. But what I can do is put a temporary thing in place. I can grab this, grab my main box, grab my face, and then if I go to Edit Mesh here, go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see Poke. And if I click Poke, what it does is it basically pokes the face. It makes a vertex in the very middle of it and then connects it with edges. Now this I'm going to delete eventually, but I'm going to use this, the vertex in the middle, to grab this, hold V, and then just snap it into place like that. So you can see there, totally cool. Snaps into place, great. So now we can make adjustments. Is it in the right position? Is it the right width, the right height and stuff? No, you can see it's far too deep because we're obviously seeing the insides there. It's sticking proud from the surface, and also it's too short. But this is all stuff we can fix with scale. So what I'm going to do is use the scale tool just to bring in that height. I don't need it to be super thick. I just need it to look like some kind of height. Again, think back to the beginning of the video. And then just to make sure that these go all the way up into the corners, I'm just going to use scale, but I'm going to ignore this. I'm going to ignore this x-axis. So I'm going to grab the red disc, the red square. I'm just going to scale it out slightly. There we go. Perfect. Now I'm not going to merge or combine or anything like this because I don't need to. This is enough information for me to sorry, it's not enough information. I don't need to merge or combine or bridge edges or anything like this, because all I'm doing here is just placing the object inside another to hide the fact that these are two different bits of physical geometry. You know, what I'm doing here is perfectly fine. Just hiding them inside the inside there. perfectly fine. Because when you step back and you turn off the wireframe, you don't really see. You know, that makes complete sense. Awesome. So like I said, I'm going to get rid of that thing in the middle. So I'm just going to move this in a direction first. So I'm just keeping an eye on there. I've got this -13 here. So I'm just going to delete these edges. So control backspace. And then I'm just going to set that translate back to 0. There you go. Super awesome. Now I want to make this on each one of the sides. Now I could go through and duplicate and manually move it into place, poke each one of those faces and do all that kind of jazz. Or I can do another trick. So the other way I've just done, if you want to practice doing that, you know, go through, poke each one of the faces, then rotate this around to each one of them. That's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that. This is just another way of doing it. Another way I can do it is by getting my rotate up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to D and X. So D, remember, releases pivot point. X snaps to grid. I'm going to snap this to the middle of the grid, right there. Because what I can use that for is to rotate round. Because this box is in the middle of the world. And if my pivot point's in the middle of the world, it's going to rotate around that pivot point. So this is why it's important to build things in the middle of the world when you know you're going to be adding like lots of different components to them. So, and I don't really care about all this information here because this is going to disappear in a bit. So I'm going to Control D to duplicate, and then I'm going to start to rotate in a direction. Or if I hold J, for instance, if I start to rotate and hold J, it snaps to 45-degree angles. So hold J, start to rotate, 45-degree, 15-degree angles, 45-degree at all. But I'm going to rotate around, so that's holding J till we're in the right position. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to duplicate, hold J, rotate that into position, duplicate, hold J, rotate that around its position. And there we've got a big old crate with some, you know, semi-interesting faces. Now I've put an X on each one of these faces, but feel free to, you know, do other stuff. You can just have like a big side which is like plyboard, like wood chip, compressed wood chip. It could be just a single beam going across. This could be a hollow thing where actually someone's taken the edge of this or someone's smashed through it. You can walk into it, you know, whatever you want. But this is actually done now, so what I'm going to do is just going to grab this, whoop, and I'm just going to combine, so make sure I've got everything selected. And then I'm going to combine this, so it's now all one selection. Now you can see here, this is why I didn't really care about all these X's having different like scale, rotate and stuff. Because when you combine everything, the new object has 0 and 1 frozen transformations. And then I'm going to delete your history, because you see here, all this information here is everything that I've done. It's all the history. And there's not a lot for this object, but I just want to make sure that, you know, periodically I'm just cleaning history. There you go. Nice and clean. And then just put the pivot point at the bottom. That is a done object. So now we have to make the same kind of information, but for these objects. Very, very simple. I'm just going to grab this again, duplicate it, and this version I'm going to delete one of the planks. So I've just got a single beam, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So I'm going to poke one of the faces on this one, for instance. And in fact, I'm just going to space these out so they're a little bit easier to deal with. There you go. So I'm going to poke this face. There you go. Make sure the pivot point's at the bottom middle of this, which it is. So again, D and V. You can see we're using a lot of the same tools over and over again. I'm going to bring this over here, rotate this into place so it's actually sat the right angle. Oops, it is. Yeah, I'm doing the wrong thing. There we go. There you go. Just use the scale to bring it in a little bit. And then I'm going to rotate this around and just get the right kind of scale for it there. Okay. Yep. So you can see how much is actually hanging inside the box. This is totally fine. Totally fine. And then I can just whoop, bring that in a little bit. Nice. and then I'm going to just freeze transformations on this, because in this case I can't necessarily do or I'm not going to do the center pivot to the grid, rotate around 4 times or anything like that. I don't necessarily want to do that, or there might be occasions where you can't do that, or again it might be just the flow you're working in. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to flip this to the opposite side, because obviously I don't really need anything on this side. It's more like here that I need it. I'm going to flip it to the opposite side and then flip it, invert it so it's going the opposite direction. Now I'm not going to set a pivot point, I'm not going to rotate it or anything like that. I'm going to leave the pivot point as it is, and then I'm going to duplicate. And then I'm just going to move it to the opposite side like this for now. Now, there's a really cool trick that I've used for years. It's really, really simple. Someone showed it me someone showed it me at some point in my early career, and it blew my mind, and it really kind of helped me. But it's so simple. I'm going to use scale to invert this to the opposite direction. Now, in my scales up here in my channel box, this is all where it lives. If I start to just basically, scale in the z-axis here, if I set in scale 1, if I set this to, in scale z, sorry, if I set this to -1, it inverts it. Because basically what I'm doing is I'm going from 1 to 0 and then to 1. And same thing in the opposite direction, I can go from 1 to 0 to 1, or to -1. So I'm going to just -1 to flip to the opposite side, all good. And then I'm just going to use V to snap to vertex, and then going to aim for one of the bottom corners to just snaps into place like that. There we go. Perfect. Now you can see they're both in the same orientation. So I want this to be on the opposite direction. I want it to be flipped. So I'll do the same thing. In this case, I want to flip it on the x-axis, the blue axis. So I'm going to go -1 in the x-axis, on the x scale. There we go. So now I've got a little bit of interest there. And all I'm going to do is just get rid of, again, those little things. So I'm going to move this. So I'm moving it across an axis which is 0, so I can just 0 that back out. So I'm just going to move it to the side. There we go. Delete those. So control backspace. There we go. Set that back to 0. And then, just like I did before, I'm going to combine all these together. But in fact, you know what? Because I know I'm going to put these on another object, why don't I just duplicate these? Move them over. Oops. So combine them, then move them over. There we go. So yeah, just combine these together. So now this object's done. So these I've just duplicated and combined together. If I put a pivot point in one of them, and then I can just anchor that to one of the vertexes. There we go. Boom. So here what I'm doing is I'm working smarter, not harder. Yes, it's good practice to repeat functions all over again, but this is just a way of speeding up the workflow a little bit. So I know that I'm going to be using these little crossbar sections on another identical object. Again, the only difference between these two objects is just the orientation of these long beams on the top. So why should I try and make that object all over again? So I duplicated those objects, combined them so they're moving as one object, and then I just used that D and V to anchor one of the vertexes, because again the vertexes, the edges, they're all flush to these vertexes. We set that up at the beginning. So now what I can do is just snap them to the same position and then just combine to make another object. Super speedy. And then I'm just going to make sure the pivot point is at the bottom of this object. Freeze transformation, delete history, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So set the pivot point to the bottom, delete history, freeze transformation. There we go. Now, whenever you combine things together, you'll always lose that pivot point you put in. So when I combined these crossbar sections to the crate, it puts the pivot point back in the middle of the object. So I've got to reorientate the pivot point. Cool. So boom, right there, I've made 4 quite nice objects from one object. And talking through this and all that kind of stuff, it's taken me a few minutes, but this might only take me like 5 minutes to do. The UVing part's going to take me a little bit longer, and obviously the texturing part's going to take me an amount of time. But the building part of things, super good. I'm not going to bother beveling these. I'm not going to bother doing anything else like that. I'm going to keep them like this. If I need to do that stuff later on, I'll do that stuff later on. But really, I don't really need to for these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these off to the side. And I'm going to make that other TNT case. But I'm going to use this the same way that I made sure that these two were the same size. I'm going to use a similar techniques to basically make sure that the other TNT crate is the same general width, but I'm going to change the general shape. So the general dimensions is going to be the same, but the way it's being formed is going to be different. Sorry, I'm losing my voice again. So I'm going to set the pivot point to the middle, and then I'm just going to make sure that the pivot point's on the bottom. I'm going to put this to the middle of the world. So make sure that holding X, I'm just snapping it to the grid there. Freeze transformation, delete history, all good. So when I make this new one now, I'm just going to make a crate. I'm going to oversize it at first, you'll see why. Set that to there. Oop, there you go. Set that to there. There you go. And I'm going to turn on X-ray, and all I'm going to do is grab faces, use that V snap to vertex, and I'm just going to snap them to the points I want to snap to. So V, I'm going to drag this down to this vertex down here. If you can see, there you go, to this vertex down here. So this outside wall here is going to be snapping to in line with this. So, boop, holding V, there you go, opposite side, holding V, like that, front side, holding V, back side, holding V. Now top, I'm going to ignore the planks on top. I'm just going to bring it to the top of what was the original lid. So grab the top, let's bring it down a little bit, and then hold V, move my mouse to the vertex I want to snap it to. There we go. So now if I move that out of the way, I've now got a box which is the exact same dimensions as this. But this one is not going to be made the same way. This one's going to be constructed as if it was two planks on the outside here that are lengthways that are going to be sandwiching in two planks on the inside here, and the lid's going to be separate. Okay, so you'll see what I mean. Now this one I'm actually going to put a little bit more information into it. I'm going to put a little more geometric information, as if it was made of older wood or if it was from a more stylized game. So, number one, I want my lid. So in this case, I'm going to once again just extrude up to make the lid. Like that. Dead easy. Now here's where things get a little bit kind of funky with the construction. So if I get my pen out, does that put, yep, and I get my little epic. So I'm going to draw a diagram on the screen. No, that's not, so I just turn on epic games. I don't want epic games. I want epic pen. There we go. So, where's my epic pen? There it is. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be making two planks going across this direction that end about there. So I'm going to have one plank there going across to a plank there and a plank there. Like that. And there'll be the same on the other, so I'll have a plank end there. So the end of a wood grain there, and then obviously two planks. This is going to sandwich in another two planks. So it's similar to how the tee box is made, where we're not just bringing the edges into a like diagonal like that, like we do with like we've done over here, for instance. We're not going to do that. We're going to make this. We're going to construct this in a more realistic way, where you will have planks sandwiching in or dovetailing in other smaller planks for strength, like that, which would means I get end grain on the end, and I also have joining points, obviously here and here and here and here and stuff. You know, I can decide how that joining point is going to look in texture later on. Cool. So let's actually do it. So what am I going to do to achieve that? Well, what I'm going to do is set up at first almost like guidelines to where these end grains are going to be. So, and this isn't going to be new stuff. I'm just going to be using the Mesh Tools Connect tool. So I'm going to add some divisions going across this direction to basically outline where this long plank's going to be and this long plank's going to be on the end. So mesh tools, connect. There we go. And then I'm just going to scale these out. So how thick is this plank going to be? I'm thinking about there. The plank's going to be about that thick. Awesome. And then I'm going to dictate where the planks horizontally are going to go. So I'm going to go across there. And there's only going to be one plank, oh sorry, 2 planks on each side. So I'm going to have one division. So again, boom, connect, boom, put it there for now. All right. And then I've got my lid. So a lot of this information is starting to come together a little bit. But now it's time to actually make some physical forms, some physical geometry. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky. This is where beveling can get a little bit tricky, or where we've got to be very aware of n-gons and that kind of stuff. So I'm just thinking where to start. Okay, I'm going to make 2 planks on the side, first of all. So I'm not going to. So this is where I'm actually going to create n-gons and then fix them for the purpose of modeling. I'm just going to grab these 2 edges right here. So yes, I'm not selecting all the way around. I'm going to bevel them, and what I'm doing here is I'm going to dictate the size of the meeting point between one plank to another. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, I want it to be a little bit on the stylized side, which is fine, and then I'm going to add a segment in between like that. Now, because I only beveled one edge on both sides, the point where it ends and connects to another edge, which I didn't select, turns into an n-gon. So you can see this face and this face are now n-gons because of this little triangle, and it'll be the same on this side, and it'll be the same on this side and this side. So be aware of that. Easy to fix. But what I'm going to do to kind of show that there's 2 planks connected here is I'm first of all going to fix the n-gon. So go to target weld. I'm just going to bring those into the corner there. Brings into the corner there. Corner there. Corner there. And then I'm going to grab that center edge. Now this is why I added that second segment, because if I just scale those in, I start to imply a shape. You know, you can see there, that's starting to look like 2 planks connecting, which is exactly what I want. Exactly what I want. So that's good. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side and this side. And again, this is going to create n-gons. It's going to create some funky stuff. It's cool. We're going to fix it using just target weld and that kind of stuff. Not going to be too difficult. So yeah, I'll just bevel these 2, and I'm going to get roughly the same shape as this. Again, just getting a fraction in there. Like that. Getting a single segment in there, which is good. And then I'm going to pull those in. Like that. Maybe a bit more. There we go. And I think just to make some adjustments, I'm just going to bring these in a tiny bit. Yeah, like that. Okay, so you can see there that we've got some nice, if we just ignore the n-gons for now, we've got some nice shapes happening. You know, nice shapes happening. But then you might be thinking, oh Lord, it's made some really horrible shapes. That's kind of fine. Again, a lot of this kind of stuff is just impressions. What I've done here is I've started to show that we've got 2 planks, and we've got 2 planks on here, 2 planks on each side essentially, and that there's some sort of realistic kind of difference between these 2 planks, because if I just had this side plank here just go all the way up to the edge here, it wouldn't look very realistic. So I can just play with some of the information that I've got here to try and just... So I'm going to grab these little n-gon edges here, these little edges here, and then I'm just going to scale those in. Again, what I'm doing here is I'm just starting to add a little bit more of that believable geometry, like realistic geometry, to make it look like there's 2 separate planks that join in one area kind of thing. Yes, there are lots of n-gons here. We've got to fix them up. Yes, I'm kind of moving stuff asymmetrically, so I am adding a little bit of asymmetry It's not perfect all the way around. That's fine. That's totally fine. And this is kind of like advanced modeling. This is stuff where you've kind of really got to bend your head and kind of really think about the logic and the construction of stuff, and know that just because you make something doesn't mean that it's going to be there at the end, or just because it doesn't look perfect right now doesn't mean it's not going to look perfect at the end. I'm just making shapes at first, like that. Cool. Now I'm going to fix up some of these end guns. In fact, no, I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to do a little bit more kind of funkiness. I'm going to bevel around this entire lid here because I want to get that separation between lid and body. But in this case, like I did before, I put the lid kind of overlapping on top here. What I'm going to do here is have the lid be the same size as the body, but I'm going to have a seam, just like we did with the crate in the first video. I'm going to do the same jazz. So I'm going to have a seam that looks like it goes in. So I'm going to just bevel this, bring it right in. I'm going to add a segment in the middle, and then I'm going to, ooh, not two segments. So let's do that again carefully. So I'm going to, let's see what 0.2 gives me. 0.15, 0.1. Yeah, okay, 0.1. Maybe 0.125. Yeah, okay. And then I'm going to have two segments, so it just means that I'm going to just put an extra segment in the middle, take that extra segment in the middle, and then just scale it in. So I'm going to scale it in this way, and then I'm going to scale it in this way, just at first. Again, just to kind of give the impression, it'll look really stiff at first, but again, we're just sketching in ideas for the time being. So I'm just getting this impression of two lids, or a lid and a body, connecting to each other. Now I'm going to do one last wacky bevel, and it's to give the impression of these two pieces here coming to an end grain here. So it kind of give more of an impression of these being separate to this. And like I said, this is wacky beveling. This is some complex beveling, but it's all good. Oops, daisy. And this as well might also just be an experiment. Sometimes you're thinking, can I just do this? So I've not actually made this object prior. I'm kind of just experimenting, but I'm confident with my experimentation. I know that if I make end guns, I can fix them, or that my ideas have some grounding in kind of like doability. So I'm just going to go around and select both the same on both sides. Oops, don't do that. There we go. There you go. So you notice as well, I'm not going into this area here. So when I bevel, I'm going to make it small like that. I'm going to add a segment on the inside. I'm just going to play with the depth. I don't think the depth is actually going to do anything for me. No, not really. Didn't really do anything for me. But definitely add that extra segment on the inside like that. Cool. So that's not creating any end guns around this area. And it's not creating any end gun. Well, it's creating a little bit of an end gun here. So I've just got to be aware of the little triangle just there that is going to be on each side. But what I'm going to do now is just kind of do what I just did with the lid. I'm going to give it the impression of two pieces of wood meeting by just carefully. So I'm going to reorientate my pivot point up a little bit. I'm going to carefully just scale this in. In fact, this might be a little bit of a tricky one. So I'm going to scale this in slightly. So I've got to be careful about this. I don't want to be too... That's enough. And then I'm going to grab the bottom edges here and I'm going to push those upwards. So why I'm not scaling these ones in is because there are other edges around here that if I just scaled them all in, they'd all be pushing upwards. So this one, instead of going in here, would actually start coming out here and it wouldn't look right. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just grab these two and then I'm just going to push them up. And just keep an eye on that little area there, that little recess. And as you can see, what that gives me, again, it looks very stiff at the minute, but we're going to fix that up. That gives me something that looks kind of something like that. It looks interesting. We get the impression of multiple different planks constructing this thing. It all looks very sterile at the minute. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Cool. So I'm going to do a save at this point because I don't want to lose anything I've done. So you can see that's quite some advanced modelling kind of thinking. We've still got some end guns in there I've got to fix up. So obviously on each end grain we've got an end gun there, and it's on again on the opposite side. And then at the top of each one of these we've got a little end gun there. But again, I'm going to go through and fix these up in a bit. So now I'm going to go through and make this look a little bit softer, because if this is beaten up a little bit, or if this is made in like the Western times, it's not going to be like super razor sharp edges. It's going to be a little bit on the rougher side. So that's what I'm going to do. Just doing some simple beveling and maybe adding a few edges and maybe nudging a few things around. So first of all, I'm going to just soften this whole top edge section by going around, selecting all the edges at the top. Then just doing a bit of a bevel, adding a segment, maybe making the fraction a bit bigger, like that. There you go, so that rounds off that top like that. And then I'm going to grab each one of the corners here. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these two top sections and just bring those in a little bit. So remember what I was talking about in class, the bevel can only go as wide as its smallest distance. So if I'm going to bevel all this edge here, it can only really go as deep as this. But if I want this bevel to be quite big, that's going to kind of mess me up a little bit. So for now, I'm just going to scale these in a little bit, give myself a bit of room. And then I can go through and I'm going to do each one of these at the same time. This is going to give me a bevel at the top and an end gun at the top and the bottom. Because this ends, it's going to probably create an end gun here, and it's going to probably create an end gun here. So you can see there, something's making this not want to go very far. So if I go bit by bit, okay, what's stopping this from going fast? So you can see this bevel isn't going as far as I want. It's because of this, okay? So it's because of this section here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this up. Well, if I delete these two edges, that's still going to maintain its shape. And in fact, if I just... So now that I'm actually starting to have to fix stuff, I'm seeing things that I could probably mess with a little bit. So if I just target weld this into here... Oops, daisy, not there. This to there and this to there. That actually fixes the end gun problem there, which I could probably do around each one of the edges. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm answering problems. So because I tried doing that bevel, and it wasn't going as far as I wanted it to, that had me go in and do some investigating. That had me say, okay, this edge here is a problem. So if I deleted that, my bevel could go even further. But then I saw this shape and thinking, oh, well, actually, you know what? If I just was to target weld these two vertexes in here, it actually fixes my end gun problem. All this stuff just comes naturally as time goes on, as you model more, as you observe more, as you practice, as you even just posing questions to yourself. If you just practice modeling, sometimes you might think, oh, what if I just do this? What if I just try and do this little thing? And it might be like, nope, it doesn't work at all. Or it might be, oh, actually, you know what? That causes a problem that I can then fix. And then that gives me knowledge of how to fix that problem, which is probably going to come up again in other places. There we go. Which also just cleans up my general topology. So now if I do that, my bevel should be bigger. No, it's pretty much the same size. Okay, cool. That's no problem. We're not completely held by our bevel. Okay, so it is this general area which is doing it. But that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some nice asymmetricalness to it. I'm going to bevel each one of these edges at the same time. However, oops, daisy. There we go. So I'm going to bevel them all at the same time. What I'm going to do is start to adjust this bevel to give myself a little bit more shape. So I'm adding a single segment in there, so I'm putting my segments to 2. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, like that. So I'm going as far as I can with it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start moving vertexes myself. I'm going to start moving edges myself. This will start to inject a little bit of asymmetricality to it, where everything so far has been very sterile and right angles, and very stiff, this is going to give me the opportunity to make stuff a little bit more wobbly, especially for the time that it's kind of set in. This introduces a new thing. I know I've shown this to a couple of people already. In my modeling toolkit up at the top right, we've got something called transform constraint. And if I drop that down, we've got edge slide and a surface slide. And basically what that means, if I go to edge slide, no matter what I do, so I'm trying to drag that up in the y-axis, that vertex can only slide across the edge. And surface slide, it's the same thing, it's just it can only slide across the surface. Surface slide, depending if you got like a really wobbly, curvy surface, can sometimes be a bit wobbly. Edge slide, though, generally is very, very good. And what I'm going to do is use edge slide to select like a whole region and just kind of slide it off a little bit. And maybe select a few bits on their own and just slide those off a little bit. So I'm manually making my bevel a little bit wider. And then I can just grab that center edge there, turn off transform constraint, and then I'm just going to nudge it in a little bit. So right there what I'm doing is I'm using a bevel to set something up, and then I'm carefully adjusting it later on to get the right shape that I want. And I go through and I do that for each one of the edges. So again, just remember to turn on and off transform constraint for stuff. And in an object like this as well, sometimes it's good to have that asymmetricality to it. You know, you don't want everything to be perfect all the time. So having a little bit of that wobbliness is great, especially for like more stylized stuff or things that are kind of built in an era of not industrialization, or things that have just been made of like a soft material like wood that have just had the crap kicked out of them over years of use. See, all I'm doing here is just using that edge slide just to move stuff around. And if I come across anything that's not particularly broken, or something that's not particularly working well and feels a bit broken, so maybe a selection might not go all the way around, that's fine, because that just gives me some stuff to kind of go back and fix up later on. Because I've been careful with my bevels, and I'm not just gone willy-nilly beveling everything, the stuff that I need to fix is a little bit easier to fix rather than trying to control something that's had like just a bunch of bevels added to it that are kind of misconsidered and not very well thought out. It's a little bit easier. And when I am doing things like bevels and stuff, I'm doing them on small orders. I'm doing them in small batches. I'm not doing like beveling with a million edges or beveling loads of edges at the same time. I'm doing little bits at the same at a time. Okay, so you can see that's looking a little bit nicer. It still looks quite stiff and rigid, but we're looking at it a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do now is go around and just fix up some of those n-gons that appear in, and also just fix up some of the geometry. So maybe turn on edge slide and smooth off some of the geometry. When I say smooth, I just mean regulate it, because I don't want to have any jagged edges in my geometry. I want to have stuff be a little bit smoother. So space stuff out a little bit. And again, because I am making something that's a little bit more on the, you know, asymmetrical, not quite organic, but definitely not like super industrialized. If stuff gets a little bit wobbly, it's probably going to work in my favor. You know, if things don't necessarily line up perfectly, like this edge now, you can see how this edge doesn't line up to this edge. That's fine. That just takes away some of that sterileness. Just like that. Yeah. Just like that. So this might take me a little bit of time to go through, but it's very good. Oops, I've over-selected there. I didn't want to select you. I want to select you. There we go. Yeah, just kind of going through. So I'm using that transform constraint edge slide to really get some of these shapes looking nice and organic and less artificial. And like I said, this is the more advanced ways of doing stuff, but really what are we doing? We're just dealing with a single polygon, a single primitive, just a cube essentially. and then we've just thought about the construction of the object. So in the real world, how is this object constructed? There are multiple planks and they're connected in a specific way to give it strength. And then we've just added in specific bevels to emphasize those. These are also things you could absolutely texture in, but I wanted to go and do some actual modeling on this one, some proper modeling. Like that. Cool. So now you can see I've kind of upset the balance on that a little bit more. And again, same stuff, I can go through and just drag some of these around a little bit. Ooh, maybe you can do something like that. So maybe raise that up a little bit. Maybe bring that in a little bit. Inject in a little bit of that asymmetricality. Maybe bring these two in a little bit. Careful, because I've still got the transform constraint on. So if I slide these in, they're going to slide in. So if I do that, I just want to nudge them a little bit. Maybe widen some up. Close some off. You know, I can have some real fun with this. So now I'm starting to kind of add some asymmetricality to it, like I said. Yeah. Now, how long? The whole video's been 50. Well, more than, we're looking at about an hour and a half, I reckon. Maybe this whole video is going to be about 2 hours long. Maybe. But as you can see, it's not hard to do some of these things. Once you know what you're doing, obviously there's a learning curve of understanding 3D and getting to grips with some of the functions and stuff. But really, once you know what you're doing, it's quite easy. It's quite fun. And obviously it's doable because there are loads of people who do 3D. So just upsetting some of that asymmetry. So yeah, so I'd probably spend more time going around and just upsetting some of that asymmetry. You know, I can do some cool stuff by just lifting stuff up. So if I grab like all this on this corner, doing the old paint select, lift that up slightly. So I want to do it slightly again. I don't want to completely ruin the topology, but just by lifting that up, it offsets that just enough where it's not quite lining up with each other. Awesome. And last thing I'm going to do is just add a few edges in here just to, again, offset the shape, but more of a fun way. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 edges going around here. There's a car beeping outside. And I'm going to add 2 edges going around here. 2 edges going around here, and then 1 edge. Yeah, 1 edge going around the width like that. So you can see I'm kind of doing some stuff like this. And all I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use the soft select to do this as well. So if you press B for Bravo, you get soft select, which is kind of like a bit of a sculpting tool. So if everything turns like orange and red and stuff, you're in soft select. Now what it does is it allows you to move stuff softly like this. So by default, if I have turned off, I'm just doing this. If I have soft select turned on, it moves like this. And you can adjust the size by holding B for Bravo and then holding your left mouse and then just dragging left and right. You can actually scale up and down. So what I can do is just scale this up and down a little bit, and I'm going to just grab certain bits and just grab certain bits and just grab certain bits and just now, if this is a realistic thing, then we probably wouldn't need to do a little bit more more stuff on this. But it's kind of like more of a stylized thing. You know, this is perfectly fine. We still do want some tight kind of shapes, like yeah, kind of like this. So if we're doing vertex mode, grab this, I can kind of put maybe even just something like that. So you can see I'm just upsetting the shape a bit. This makes it a bit interesting. I'm doing the same thing up there, so I'm going to do this instead. Okay, so you kind of get what I'm doing. So I'm just making the shape a little more interesting. Having a bit of fun with it. Now I'm going to show you a few little fun tricks you can do with on something like this with the bevel tool and the target weld and cut tool to fix some stuff. Now there are a bunch of n-gons in here as well. I know that I'm not fixing up. I might fix them up, but for now I'm not quite finished, so I'm not too bothered. But what I want to do is maybe add a few wood chips in there, a few places where the wood is splintered, and that's quite easy to do, and I'll show you how. So if I want a big nice split across here, if I just grab an edge, I'll grab these two edges, I'm going to bevel, so now we get this, and I'm going to add a segment in the middle like that. So what I can do with this is just make the segment, and then using the vertexes I can kind of get the shape of this kind of split how I want it. So let's paint those. Let's paint those. And then just paint those. Now these ones I'm going to drag over here a little bit. Like that. And then I'm going to grab these vertexes that are in the middle. Let's push them in a little bit. And maybe even bring them in a little bit. Something like that. Because then when I harden these edges around here, you kind of get like a bit of a split. You know, you're going to see that commonly on edges. So I could get something like this vertex. So I'm going to do it on a vertex this time. So I'm going to split this vertex by beveling it. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab this. So this is making a really dirty n-gon. But if I grab that, I'll target weld this. So I'll fix this n-gon by target welding it inside there. I'll bring this in there like that. And then I'm going to cut from this edge to this edge using the multi-cut tool, which is a little knife. So I'm going to click and drag to the edge there. I'm going to click and drag into the edge there. There we go. So that now gives me a bit of a solid piece of geometry. And then I can, you know, I can just use target weld or some, not target weld, the multi-cut just to bring that up there, and then that down there. And again, same jazz. If I was to just harden those edges, now we get a bit of a slash in the corner there. So I can do this, not overdo it, but I can do this in a few little areas just to kind of give the impression of this box has, you know, seen some hard times and it's been split and chipped and stuff. And it just makes the box a little bit more kind of, you know, charming, especially if you're doing stylized stuff. So you can even get stuff like this where I'm going to really mess this up. So I'm going to drag you up to there. I'm going to drag you up to there. You up to there. I'm going to drag you. So this has taken some real damage. You know, this has been dented. And then this has been pushed in. This has been pushed in. And then this has been pushed in a little bit. Like that. And then we could just bring these edges closer together. Make sure we're only selecting what we want. Bring it in. Again, if we just go that, boom. There you go. So again, it's a really nice, fun little things we can do with modeling. And again, all we've done there is use all the tools we know how to use already: bevel, add edges, multi-cut, extrusion, bridge, and we're able to make some really, really cool stuff. Super, super cool stuff. Now, the barrels. So we've done a lot of boxes here, and some fun boxes. The barrels, dead easy to do. What is a barrel? It's a big old cylinder. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a big old cylinder. But again, I'm going to keep this the same real world scale as this. So if this is a 6 foot dude, if this is 6 foot tall, then I'm going to make this relative to that. So I've just got to make sure that my initial radius, if this is like a waist high to a 6 foot tall dude, so yeah, that's about maybe a little bit taller. So I'm going to drag this. Oh, before I actually do that, I'm going to dictate the amount of edges going around. Now the one in the game was 18, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to 18 as well, like that. And I'm just going to drag this top bit up to about there. There we go. And is that the right radius? That feels kind of right for the radius. Cool. And I'm going to make the exact same one. So I've got the reference off to my left here. There's 6 bolts, 6 bands going around it, plus this little hole in the middle, which I'm going to show you how I can make just by using the bevel tool. It's super cool. So let's just let me adjustments there. Okay, so number 1, I've got the cylinder, I've got the radius. That's important. Number 2, I want to get the general curve of the object. Now here is what I don't need to be adding tons of edges in at the beginning. I'm going to add 1 edge in at the beginning. And this is going to dictate the widest part of my barrel. So I'm not going to do a super crazy barrel. I'm going to go something like that. And then I'm going to split at the top and the bottom the exact same way. And then I'm going to use the square. So the greens, because I don't want them to go out. I want them just to stay where they are. I'm going to do that. So again, I'm getting that kind of shape. And then the last one, I'm going to do the very top and the very bottom, which is the same thing. I'm just going to... There we go. And again, same thing. Just slightly nudge it out. So step 2, just by using 1, the scale, and 2, the add edges, I'm able to get a general barrel shape in there. Now you might be thinking, well, yeah, but I can still see some kind of like divisions in here. You can see there's a sharper edge right there. These will all disappear when we start adding in the bands. Trust me. So now we start adding in the bands. And where are the bands? So there's no band in the middle. There's a band at the very top and the very bottom, and 2 bands basically around here. So then now I've got to add those kind of divisions in, but I've got to make sure that they're all the same height, they're all the same size, and that can be a bit of a tricky thing to do at first, but generally we should be okay if we're just paying attention to what we're doing. So I know I'm going to have a band at the top here and a band at the bottom, so what I'm going to do is going to add another edge at the top and the bottom. Or well, I'll do one at a time because I can't really do it accurately in 2 segments. So I'm going to add this one here. So I'm going to add a segment here. And I'm going to think, right, let's get my tools up. Is that the right kind of distance? Is that the right height for me? Maybe I need to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to slide it down a little bit. Now I'm keeping an eye on what's going on here. So my slide, I'm going to make that 0.4.5. Nice and round number. Cool, so I'm going to complete that. I'm happy with it. Now the bottom one, if I open up my tools again, and if I... So 0.45 is going down. So this would actually be thinner than the one that would be at the top. So what I've got to do is basically do the opposite. So if I'm only moving 0.05 in my top one, in one direction, so I'm going to 0.45, if I want to go the opposite direction, I go to 0.55 because I'm adding 5 to it, so 0.55. So now both of those will be the exact same height, top and bottom, which is good. Now this is where I get a little bit eyebally and a little bit kind of making sure everything's as good as I can get it. But I'm going to do the exact same kind of thing. So I'm going to add 1 around here. Maybe, yeah, somewhere, yeah, one on this band here. And again, the same one around here. So I've got to add that in. And I'm just going to pay attention. So I'm going to get close here. And I'm going to look at this distance here. And then this distance here. And again, I'm going to make adjustments. So 0.45. 0.48. No. Oh, 1.8 that one. 1.848. There we go. 0.45. Okay, 0.45 again looks pretty good because I'm going to put a band here. So I'm looking at this edge, I'm looking at this edge. They look pretty bang on, but maybe if I put 0.48, 0.46. You know, you can spend ages trying to do this. So 0.46. Okay, remember that number again. I'm happy with that. Oops, it is. There you go. So this one's going to be my top band. This one's going to be my bottom band. So I do the exact same thing here, but again, we kind of go in the opposite direction. So if we're removing 4 to go to 0.46, then we need to add 4 to go to 0.54. Because 0.46 is going to be moving it downwards. 0.54 is going to be moving upwards because we want to be going towards the center line. So again, and I want to go to 0.54. You fool. What are you doing? Why aren't you doing the thing? 0.54. There we go. And then just turn that back on. There we go. So now, again, I've got this band and this band, this band, and this band. Cool. So the last one is the third one, which is pretty much in the center of this area here. Or maybe just slightly up here at the top. So what I'm going to do is, again, just do some adding of edges. So, boot up. Now this one I want to actually, I'm going to add an edge and then I'm going to bevel it because I don't want the same distance between this, this, and this because we're going to end up with the same distance. I want to have a little bit of asymmetricality. So what I'm going to do is, what am I doing? Connect. I don't want it to be in the center. So I'm going to add 0.55. Yeah, 0.55 looks okay. Yeah. Maybe 0.58. Yeah, 0.58. Okay. Again, the same kind of thing for what we added to the bottom. So here, what we need to do is if we're taking away, or we're adding 8 to the top, because it's 0.58, we need to take away 8 from the bottom one, so it needs to be 0.42. This one needs to be slide 0.42. There we go. And then we're going to bevel both of these at the same time so that the ratios are the same. So bevel, and again I'm going to find that, I'm going to find a good position. I'm going to eyeball that into place. 0.4, 0.38, 0.35. Okay, that looks about pretty much the same width. So a little bit of maths involved there, and I am making quite a complex barrel at this shape. At this case, I'll make a very simple barrel in a sec, but this I'm doing a bit more complexity to it. Okay, and I'm just going to just slightly scale it in. There you go. So now we've got, what we set up here is those little extraction zones, like the extrusion zones that we've set up for most things. So we're going to do this all at the same time. So the very top, this one, and then we do this one, and then we do at the bottom this one, and then we do this one, and then we, oops a daisy, and then we do this one. So you can see that we've got two nice close ones here, a bit of a gap, and then we've got this one here, which is good. And all we've got to do is just extrude, slightly nudge it out. So that's too much, so I'm going to just change my change my thing here. Slightly nudge it out like that. So it's at 0. See what 0.01 looks like. 0.01. There you go. 0.1. Yeah, 0.1 looks okay. And look at that. So the main body of the barrel is done, which is brilliant. Now it's the top and the bottom for the little recesses where the caps are. So I'm going to deselect everything, holding tab to do my paint selection, and then because I got both selected I can know they're both going to do the same thing. So I extrude and nudge it in a little bit, and then I'm going to extrude again. I'm going to bring it down a little bit and then in a little bit, just like that. Boom, done. And the top and the bottom should look exactly the same, which they do. Super good. And you can leave that barrel like it is now, so you don't need to really do any more geometric stuff to it. But if you did want to do some stuff to it, I'm going to add a plug at the top with a bung, and I'm going to add a plug in the middle that you could put either a bung in or like a tap if it's like a beer keg or something. And those are done the exact same way. One's easier to do than the other because one is already set up to be non-n-gony. So I'm going to make a plug at the very top. So I'm not going to make it in the middle because that'll look very boring. So I'm going to take this pole at the top. I'm just going to move it to where I want that plug to be. So, like say, about there. So it's off to one side, right there. All I'm going to do here is just do the old bevel the vertex to get a circle. Now I'm going to, like we were watching the video at the very beginning, there's a slight indentation in some of this. I'm going to make a slight indentation on this. I'm going to make this go in slightly. And then just for poops and giggles, I'm going to make the bung the same within the same geometry as this. I'm going to make the bung out of this. So all I've got to do now is just extrude up and then extrude out. Well, not then just offset outwards. Maybe pull it up a little bit further. And then just to cap this off, we do the whole extrude and merge to center like that. And I'm going to make this look a little bit cartoonish. So I'm going to just bevel this whole edge. Maybe add a segment in it like that. Yep. And then I'm going to do a little bit of fun stuff. So, right, if we decent like that, I'm just going to grab all these top faces, and I'm going to just slightly do a bit of that, and then I'm going to grab the next ring of faces, and I'm going to slightly do it a bit more. Bring it off like this, then slightly nudge it off to the left like this. So I'm kind of just upsetting the shape a little bit, making it look a little bit less formulaic. So now it's a bit wobbly. So that one's really easy to do, because what we're doing is we're beveling a pole, which will give you a perfect circle. But what if I want to add a circle on the edge here? Well, it's a bit harder to do that. Actually, coming back to this, one thing you could do with an object like this is actually take down the poly count, because this is an 18-sided cylinder from the beginning, but it means that this is going to be an 18-sided object here, and you're going to have like a really dense object on a not very dense object. So what we could do here is start to bring the poly count down a little bit. I'm going to half this to 9, and it should look perfectly fine. Again, if this is meant to be some way stylistic, it should be perfectly fine. There's no reason why everything should be mega poly count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a target weld, and I'm going to go around and basically get rid of, maybe just over, but I'm going to get rid of some of these edges, some of this geometry. So target weld, make sure I've not got anything selected. I'm going to find a halfway point. Again, this is why halfway points are great. So that's my halfway point there. And I'm going to just, first of all, just bring the outside round a little bit. So I'm going to bring those two together, that one. Oops, daisy. And let's get in. Let's have a look. Let's look at this from the top. There we go. Yeah, and then that one, and then that one. So I'm gonna try and mimic the same. So this is my halfway point. You can see the pattern I've got going on there. So I've got triangle, quad, triangle, quad, quad, triangle, quad, quad. I'm gonna try and do the exact same thing on this side. So it's this one into there. That one's left alone, but this one's into there. Cool. So I've set up the amount of edges going around here. So what I need to do now is mimic that on this plug. So this might be a little bit harder. Sorry, I'm losing my voice again. This might be a bit harder on this because we can actually see inside it. You could delete this and remake the plug, or you could go in there and start kind of moving the camera around. I think for ease, I'm just going to delete the plug. You know, it's common to do this sometimes. You make something go, okay, I should probably go back and remake it. So I'm going to literally go back and remake it if it's easy enough. So what I'm going to do is just all these little edges on the inside here, I'm just going to target weld those in. And yeah, this video is getting long, but again, feel free to pause and come back and watch it in different bits. Something like that. Like that. Like that. Like that. Like that. That and like that. There you go. So now we've got a much less dense hole. So now we've got 10. So we've gone from 18 to 10. 10's okay. Yeah, 10's fine. So now what we can do is do a quick little trick called circularize, which is just up there, just to the left of multicut. And what this does is it takes a selected area and circularizes it, so it turns it into a circle like that. So now if I select all the outside top here, circularize it, there you go. Now all I'm going to do is just rotate this inside just a bit. There we go. So I can just move hold this bit around. Over here, maybe scale down the whole thing a little bit so the plug's not quite as big. There we go. And now I can just make that plug again. So, you know, extrude it up, give it a rotate, give it a whatever, you know, give it a bit of an angle, maybe give it a wider kind of shape. Extrude, close that off, bevel that edge. Do I need an extra bevel? I think not actually, so looking at that, cool. So that's a little bit of optimization there. That's just because going from a wide 18-sided object to a small 18-sided object, for me it's too much of like a shape discrepancy, but that's better. Now let's make a hole on the side. So we're going to do the exact same thing pretty much, and just find one of the cardinal. So here the edge goes all the way through the middle, which is good. I'm going to put an edge right here. So all I'm doing again is just beveling this edge. So I'm going to bevel this vertex right in the middle. It turns it into a bit of a diamond, and then all I'm going to do now is just decide how big that's going to be, roughly, because we're going to change the shape of this a little bit. Something like that. Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be about that big. So I can use this circularize tool on this as well, because if you try and circularize a four-sided shape, you're just going to get a square. Like that. Which is nice. So it takes it from a bit of a diamond to a square. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this into an 8-sided shape by using the multicut tool. So I'm just going to, from the middle, I'll fix up the end guns we're going to make in a second, but I'm going to go from, if I hold shift when I do this, I can go from the middle there to the middle over there, and then holding shift again, from middle there, middle there, middle there. What shift is doing is it's giving it 10% increments. So if I click and drag, you can see it's going like 10% increments. But by default, if I just hold shift, it'll go to the center of that edge. So there, boom. And now, if I grab all these faces, I'll circularize this one. Nice. Now we've got a circle. So all I'm going to do here is just, I mean, I could add another edge. I could bevel these edges, for instance. If this is too low res, I could bevel these and then circularize this, just to give me a slightly more even circle. Pardon me. But all I'm going to do for this is just, again, extrude it in, push it in a little bit, bring it in a little bit, and then extrude it out, pull it out, give it a bit of a bung shape, extrude, bring to center, bevel, give that bevel. I'm going to bevel the whole, well, I'm going to fix the end guns first, because obviously we've got 4 big end guns there. So all I'm going to do for this is just bring these up into the corner, like that. Or in fact, actually, oops, daisy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these in the center to the center like this. Oh my god, my camera's all out of whack. So bring these to the center like that. There we go, my camera should be fixed now. So then these, because they're closest to the center, I'm going to bring these into the center like that. And then I'm going to bring these out to the edge like that. Again, this is just because I kind of wanted to do it this kind. It felt a bit better for doing it like that, rather than creating these really tight triangles that spread out across the surface. These are now just a little bit more contained, and we shouldn't have as many, if any, little noisy little artifacts that surface. And then I'm just going to bevel this edge just a little bit there, and I should probably bevel the edge at the top as well. If I make this all a little bit bigger, because what's the point of putting this nice stylized geometry if I'm only going to hide it? So make it a bit bigger, and then bevel that. There you go. So you can see there, 2 perfectly fine ways of making some shapes. And you can kind of see those triangles, if you look carefully, you can kind of see that triangle effect appearing. That's because triangles on curved surfaces aren't necessarily that great. But for that, it's fine. You know, for this anyway, it's fine. And there you go. So there you got a barrel. Like I said, this is more of a complex barrel. You've got loads of different edges going across there. You could go through and probably bevel some edges, like bevel these top and bottom edges, just to be a bit safer, you know. But if you want to make something that's a little bit simpler, I'm going to make one with 3 bands that's really stylized. So I'm going to make like an 8-sided or a 12-sided barrel this time. So again, cylindrical, boom, get my radius in there. So how wide is this going to be? And then I can get my tall. How tall is this going to be? Oh, actually, before I do that, before I make my height, before I adjust it in height, I should get my subdivision axis. So that's going to be 12. Nice. And then I can get my height in there. Now the reason is, if I start to adjust things that aren't in that little list, like if I force the height like this, it stops me from changing other options. It starts to kind of break the geometry. So I'll bring this up a little bit. But again, same stuff. I'm just going to add that edge in the middle to dictate the width. Oops, let me reset the tool. There we go. So that's going to be my width. And then I add one at the top and the bottom. They're also going to be my width. And in fact, I'm just going to make this a little bit more kind of cartoony. Like that. Then I'm going to add 2 more here. Again, the same jazz. I'm going to make little segments for my bands to come out of. So that's where my top bands are going to come out of. And then I'm going to bevel this. That's my center band's going to come out of. I'm just going to change this. Looks a little bit too crap. So, like that. There we go. Then I'm just going to extrude out of this. Bit of thickness. In fact, I could probably get this bottom one here and make that a bit wider. Yeah. There you go. Top and bottom. So you see, it's a lot of the same stuff. And again, this is going to be the same kind of process as when you're doing crates, as when you're doing barrels. It's just all the same jazz. So bring it in a little bit, then extrude, bring it in a little bit, bring it in a little bit. Cool. And done. And this one I just need to manually go through and harden some of these edges, just because it's not particularly working. I'm not going to bother beveling anything on this one. I think we've seen enough barrels as it is, all old coopered barrels as it is. So if I just harden all these edges, there we go. So well, really, really easy. Now for something like this, obviously it's a lot more stylized. It might be for a game where we're stood back a little bit, or it might be for like a very stylized game. For this, I would actually be using each one of these strips as a separate plank. When I'm texturing, I would use this as the plank. Whereas something like this, because the planks might be a little bit more curvy, I might not necessarily use these edges to divide up the actual planks. It depends on how I'm feeling, or depends on the project. But to add the other edges and stuff, like to add the bungs and stuff like that, I would probably do the exact same thing. If I needed that geometric little bit of evidence there. If I don't, actually could probably just make a bit of geometry and smash it in. So boom, 2 very, very simple objects made. I'm going to make one more cylindrical barrel, and it's going to be even easier than these 2, but it's going to be an oil drum. So as my last one, and this is going to be a nice high resolution AAA game oil drum kind of thing. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make my radius. It's not going to be as wide as this, but I'm actually going to up my poly count. So I'm going to start adding to this, and I want to go quite high with this. So I'm thinking 32. Very high res. So this is a really high res barrel we're making. So about that high. Cool. So there's similar kind of features on this where we've got bands that wrap around it, top, middle, there's 2 in the middle and there's 1 at the bottom. But in this case, instead of being these like separate metal bands that attach to it, they're actually just designed into the object itself, and are more kind of like little ridges rather than big honking things. So what I'm going to do is just think about that when I do all this. So I'm going to add edges, and I'm going to set up for the lip at the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add edges in, add 2, not extrude, but scale those out. So I'm adding and setting up the edges for those little lips at the top. And then I'm going to add another couple, and I'm going to add these and move them into position for where these little ridges are on oil drums. Very good. Now, like I said, this is like high resolution game. This is a hero prop, if ever an oil drum is a hero prop. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to add the little ridges, the easiest part. I'm just going to bevel. There's no reason why we should be using anything else. I'm going to bevel. I'm going to bring the fraction right down because these aren't particularly that big. I'm going to add a segment like there, and then I'm going to take that center segment and I'm just going to scale it out, but I'm going to ignore the y-axis. So I'm going to grab the green square and I'm just going to carefully nudge it out like that. I mean, to be honest, this, if I step back, these could actually be a bit bigger, these bevels. So I'm going to just go back on what I said. I'm going to just make those like, maybe that. Yeah. And a segment. Maybe a fractional smaller. Yeah, there we go. And then do it again. Just grab the center edges. Scale out, ignoring the y-axis. Something like that. That's looking alright. Now, because this is a hero object, I'm going to do some nice beveling on this to make the edges less, obviously, sharp like this. You don't always need to go into this level of detail, but this is, again, like a hero object. This is like a really dense object, high res. So I'm going to make these a little bit more bent, a little bit more curved. Like that. There we go. That's a bit better. It's cool. So it's already looking like an oil drum. But what I'm going to do now is make the ridges, and then I'm going to make the actual inset at the top. This is all exactly the same thing as when we're doing the barrels, when we're doing the boxes, when we're doing the crates. It's just applying the same reasoning to different areas. So what I'm going to do is just scale that out slightly. And again, things on this level of detail, like believability, don't need to have like honking big bits of geometry. It's more the subtle features. So if I just do that, I'm going to offset it slightly. And then I'm going to do top and the bottom separate because I'm going to make the top bit shallower. So, oh no, top deeper I should say. So I'm just going to extrude this inwards slightly at first, and then extrude it down like that. And then I'm going to set up I'm going to bevel some of this stuff later on, so I'm going to just set up for that bevel later on. And then below, this is not going to be as deep. So I'm going to grab this. Again, I'm going to scale it in fractionally. Oh, that's divisions. So let me just do that again. Careful that I don't do any double extrusions. Okay. Offset. Fractionally. Scale in. That's enough. And then just get ready for that bevel later on. Cool. So far you can see that it's looking nicey nice. Last one, I just want to... oh, actually, no, this looks a little bit deep now that I'm looking at it. So I'm just going to grab that. I'm just going to move it upwards a tiny. There we go. So now I'm going to bevel to round off these edges, and then this is pretty much done. This is a brand new, off the line. There's no damage to it. Can. If you wanted to... drum. If you want to do damage to it, then you can add damage to it later on. Or you do the damage through texture. So... I'm going to grab all the edges. I'm going to bevel. See how much I can bevel it at first. Okay, cool. So I'm going to grab all the edges. So I just did a bit of a test there. There we go. I accidentally deselected stuff then. Like that. And then I'm going to bevel them. And like I said, because this is a hero object and we're going higher res than we normally would do, I'm going to add a segment like that. So now we've got a nice raw, round roll-topped barrel. Top and bottom. So now that should be nice and round, yep. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick old little giving it a spout. So I'm going to add it about there. I'm going to choose Actually, I won't do one spout, because if you look at oil drums, they have two spouts. They have a large one and a small one, and the small one's there to allow air to get in, oxygen to get in, to then take up the space where the oils or whatever's inside is leaving. That's why some things have like a small hole so oxygen gets in to allow the liquid to be pushed out. Bit of science. So I'm going to make the big hole like this, and then I'm going to small hole. I have another bit of geometry, but this one I'm just going to bevel it, get the size, and this one's going to be really easy. I'm just going to do some. So, oops, so they kind of come up a little bit, and then they come out a little bit, and then they come up a little bit, and then they come in a little bit, and then they go up a little bit, and then they come in a little bit, and then they go up a little bit, and they come out a little bit, and they go up a little bit. So I'm looking at a reference while I'm doing this as well, and then going a little bit. And this is the cap essentially, so I'll boof, boof, and then I'll add some divisions around here just to allow me to bend that shape. Just like that. Nice, good. Oh, that could actually do with coming back a bit more actually. That's a bit too far out. Oops, make sure I get everything. So this needs to come back a little bit further like that. And then the small one I'm going to make out of a 10-sided cylinder. Or a 12. It's got 10. I said 10. Now this one I just need to anchor to a pivot point. Put the pivot point at the bottom. Get my wireframe up. Anchor this to in line with the object. So I'm going to anchor it to that vertex. So vertex, snap it to there. Move it in. Scale it down. And then this I just need to make into the shape of this little spout thing. So it's going to be a lot smaller than that. So I'm going to be like there. And then huh. 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 There you go. And then for this I'm just going to actually just delete the very bottom faces because I don't need them. There we go. Oh, shouldn't have deleted you. Yeah, there you go. That's fine. But yeah, just delete those. Don't need those ones. Yeah. And then just combine that together. Left and edge. There we go. Loads of good stuff. I'm going to leave the video there now and probably do another like extra video because this is getting long now. This is getting about 2 hours long, I think. We've covered a lot inside here. Again, there's not a whole lot of things that are different. In fact, there's nothing different to what we've done in class. We've just used the same kind of thinking, just maybe kind of taking it a bit further, thinking about, you know, taking a simple shape like our basic crate that we used or made, and then just changing some of the things that we do. So instead of doing all 6 sides, we do 5 sides and then make the lid out of the top. You know, then we make little support beams by making separate geometry and moving it into place, deleting faces, bridging faces. You know, taking this one object and then converting it into other objects, modifying those objects so that they, you know, you got some variation, adding other objects to it to give it a bit more kind of flavor. You know, adding more interest to a box. So something like this. This is like a really gnarly box, so making a bit more interesting shape out of something. Obviously, this is like complex. This is like you've got to really wrap your head around bridging and beveling and stuff. Like I said as well, this I've not fixed the end guns on this, but you'd have to fix the end guns on it. And then using pretty much the exact same thinking to make objects like this. So we got hyper realistic game. We've got AAA game, and then we've got stylized game. Exactly the same processes, 3 different models, 3 different games, exactly the same kind of basic functions. So, really, really fun stuff, all very simple to do. Oops, I did. And like I said, everything else it's pretty much built and extrapolated from this. So this is not hard to do. It's just a little bit of hard to get over that first hurdle of learning it. And then when we start to make other objects, you'll find that, oh yeah, that's just exactly the same way that we did this. And that's just exactly the same way we did this. There's only a few bits what we're going to be doing which are going to be completely different, that are not going to have any grounding in what we're doing here. There's only like 1 or 2 bits. But other than that, cool. So, see you in the next one.